Hey everybody, welcome back to week 2 of our emotions series, our vibes series. Last week we talked about how emotions in general don't have to be the boss of us. And this week I want to turn our attentions towards a very specific emotion, that emotion being anger. I'll let you in on a little secret. One of my guilty pleasures, one of my YouTube rabbit holes, or TikTok or Reddit or wherever, are the videos of people who have road rage and then immediately have this moment of karma where they, wreck their car or, they rear end somebody because they were being jerks. And it made me think of this series and this week specifically. And I know that most of you don't drive. I know some of you do, but I know that most of you don't. So I'm going to turn this into what I'm going to call hallway rage. When you're in school and you bump into someone or someone bumps into you and maybe you drop your phone or your books and you just want to turn around and rip that person. Kind of makes me, one of those things that just pops into your head. So whether you're on the road or in the hallway, we all know that kind of rage. Even if you don't yell at someone or act rudely, you probably know the feeling of that kind of rage inside of you. Most of us don't actually call it rage or even anger. Maybe you say that you're frustrated. Your sister shrinks your favorite shirt in the wash. You aren't mad, you're frustrated. Maybe your dad reminds you how you could get grounded for the weekend. You aren't angry, you're frustrated. When the kid that acts like they're superior to everyone, you get frustrated enough to hope maybe they face plant in front of everyone. Why? Because we don't like to think of ourselves as angry. But let's be honest, there's a difference between being mad and being frustrated. Is there a difference between road rage and road frustration? Hallway rage and hallway frustration? This week we focused on last week we focused on our emotions or the vibe inside of us. But we're also talking about keeping those vibes from controlling us. And one of those emotions that shows up for everyone and tries to take over is anger. The thing about anger is it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it means yelling at someone or losing your temper. That's how we normally think of it, but sometimes it means giving someone the silent treatment. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes when someone is mad at you, they're not saying a word. It's way worse. In fact, maybe you're really good at giving the silent treatment. Not only is it a way for you to process your anger, but it's also a way for you to control the situation. You hold the power because you withhold the words. Even more complicated, not all anger is bad. Sometimes it's okay to be angry. We feel angry when we see injustices. Maybe certain groups of people aren't being treated fairly. Causes that we care about not being taken seriously. Racism. People don't have clean water. Maybe people not taking care of the planet. When we see these things in the world that aren't right, it's a good thing to get angry. Jesus got super angry when people were mistreated, like flipping furniture angry. So it isn't always bad. In fact, sometimes anger is constructive. It moves us towards a positive action. But other times it is destructive. It moves us toward regret, and it hurts people. And what are we supposed to do with that? Either way, I think we all can agree that anger is a powerful emotion. The question is, what do we do with it? How do we keep destructive anger from taking us over and bossing us around? So we're going to look at a passage from the book of James in the New Testament. James was the brother of Jesus, but when Jesus was alive and walked the earth, James didn't follow him. It was only after Jesus was crucified and came back to life that James was convinced. And eventually James became a leader in the early church. He lived in Jerusalem. He wrote his letter primarily to Jewish Christians. It's a letter full of wisdom. And in this section we're going to look at, James offers a principle that may sound a little too simple at first, but because if you and I can learn to do this, it'll change everything. So I'm going to give you a second, grab your Bible. The words will be on the screen in case, but I'll just give you a couple seconds to grab it. Look it up. We're in James 3. We're going to start at verse 13. In verse 13, James says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" We hear the word wise a lot, but we may not really focus on what it means. Wise is different from smart. You can be born smart, but wisdom is earned. If you are wise, you look and take what you've experienced and learn from it. You understand that life is connected and that actions have consequences. And James is asking, how many of you get that? If you do get it, here's what I have to say next. So after that verse, he says, in the second part of 13, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So James is making a connection here. He's saying wise people are humble. And what does humility look like? It starts with a proper view of yourself. You don't see yourself as the exception to the rules. You don't think the world revolves around you and your desires. You don't think that you deserve better treatment than anyone else. You don't see anyone or everyone else as a means to an end that you want. James is saying that wise people don't do these things. He continues in 14 to say, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth." So harbor basically means to let something stick around. If you let stuff stay with you that makes you think you're better or more important, don't deny it, call it out. Don't pretend to be fine. And then James says this in 16. "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." So let's say it in a different way. When pride or arrogance gets lodged inside of us, it comes out in our actions. Not exactly great news, but a couple of verses later he asks, "What causes fights and quarrels among you?" I bet I could stop right there and everyone could have an answer to that question. Unrealistic rules from parents, younger siblings that won't stop being annoying, friends that don't text or call back, maybe a parent that acts like they're always right, people who are obnoxious online. We all have an answer outside of us that causes problems among us. But James isn't buying it. He answers his own question then by saying, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? In other words, your mom may drive you crazy or your little brother may be annoying, but what causes the arguments? It's not them, it's you, or more specifically, what's in you. And this is a big deal because as long as we think the problem is someone else, their behavior, their character, their mistake, we'll never deal with the anger problem inside of us. We think the problem is people not doing things our way, but James is saying the problem is that we want to get our way. But as long as we think the problem is outside of us, we'll never take care of what's inside of us. I'm going to say that again. As long as we think the problem is outside of us, we'll never take care of what's inside of us. You may disagree because maybe you feel like the things you want are things that have to be earned. Things like freedom, respect, trust, responsibility. And when you don't get the things that you feel like you've earned, it doesn't seem fair. And you're right. But James isn't talking about what's fair and what isn't. He's saying that if you want to get to the root of your frustration and anger, you need to be willing to admit that the problem is in you. The problem is when you don't get what you think you deserve. So what do? Well, we have to flip things up. When other people aren't acting like we think they should, or we aren't getting what we think we deserve, we have to change what we say. Instead of saying, he's being selfish, she's being annoying, they're being rude, instead we say, you know what the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. I understand that sounds terrible, but I'm telling you that when you start doing this, relationships change. Your frustration level changes, and your anger changes. Because you're no longer looking to other people as a reason for why you feel the way you feel. As long as you're looking to other people as the reason, other people have control of your emotions. On the other hand, when you start admitting that the problem is that you're not getting what you want, you get control back. And it isn't that we all want, isn't that what we all want when it comes to our emotions? We want control. James is making the point that as long as you think the problem is outside of you and that it's somebody else's fault, you will feel like you get a free pass to act however you want. Because you can say that you didn't do anything wrong. You can avoid ownership and responsibility. You can look at others and say, they made me do it. They made me act that way. They made me say it. But James is saying, no, if you did that thing or said that thing that was angry, mean, or hurtful, it was because it was in you to say it or do it. Of course, there are circumstances that should upset you, like when you're treated unfairly by a friend, a parent, a sibling. But imagine if in the middle of feeling your anger and frustration, you were able to say, part of the problem, not the whole problem, but part of it, is that I'm not getting what I want. Just being willing to say that out loud helps you keeps yourself from being controlled by anger and frustration. Owning what you can own in the problem keeps your anger and frustration from driving you and owning you. And no matter who you are, that's a good thing. So based on what we've talked about today, here's my question. What's your relationship with anger? Do you control it, or does it control you? If I were to ask your coach, your teacher, your mom, dad, siblings, teammates, classmates, friends, what would they say? Because if anger is controlling you in any of those relationships, then it's controlling you too much. And the only way to beat it, according to James, is with humility. And humility says, it's not my fault, it's not all my fault, but I'm going to own part of it. And my part of it has to do with me not getting what I want. So when you feel anger, when you feel frustration, or whatever you want to call it, rising up, when you're in that disagreement with a parent, a step sibling, a coach, a friend, ask yourself, what am I not getting that is causing this anger? Because even if you aren't the whole problem, humility means recognizing that you are part of the problem. And when you learn how to recognize that, the emotion of anger begins to lessen its control over you. The good news is for those of us who are Jesus followers, we follow someone who has led the way in this. Jesus said no to getting his way. In fact, if you turn to Philippians 2, verses 6 and 7, Apostle Paul wrote this and said, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus had every reason and every right to get his own way, but he didn't. He gave up what he wanted so that we would know how valuable we are in God's eyes. Paul starts this passage about Jesus and his humility by saying in verses 1 and 2, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love. He tells us to be like Christ, and then he tells us what Christ is like. Humble when he had every reason not to be. Jesus surrendered his way when he could have easily fought for it. Following the example of Jesus is how we keep anger from controlling us. Because of Jesus, anger doesn't have to be the boss of us. Because when you follow him, he will nudge you away from self-centeredness, from arrogance and pride, and move you towards humility and love for others. And as that happens, you'll find that anger no longer has the hold on you that it did before. And less powerful anger is a win for everyone. As I wrap up, I want you to begin imagining what life would look like if anger didn't control you. None of us will get this right completely or all the time. But as you discuss this in your groups, in chats with friends and family and small group leaders, I want you to think of the question, in your personal circumstances, what would it look like for you to choose wisdom and humility over anger?